Okay, so
Okay.
you are officially woke. That is what wokeness is about. It's like, people's grandparents or their great-grandparents were slaves.
Well, it's okay. No, it's okay. Guys,
Fuck you, I'm talking.
Guys, I actually want to hear. I want to hear.
No, this
It's
guy,
okay. It's okay. I want to hear. Let's at least hear the argument. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Go.
Hey, so this is a video with Ben Shapiro doing a Q&A at Iowa State University. This is one of his older videos. Came out about 2 years ago. Really good statements. Enjoy.
Why is this microphone so low? That's weird as hell. Hey, so my name's Ben. I'm also a Jew. I hate public speaking.
Well, it's the two of us against the world here in Iowa. So.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
You should grow out your hair. I mean, Jewish people have beautiful hair, man. You should show it off. No, but I'm not here to talk about something that's very funny. I kind of have I don't know much about you, so I have a series of back and forth questions, if that's okay, just before I ask my question. So do you come from Holocaust survivors, or are you a Jewish family that didn't?
So my great-great-grandparents arrived here. A lot of our extended family was killed in the Holocaust, but our immediate
Your
family
great-great-grandparents, but not your grandparents.
Right.
Oh, do you have friends whose grandparents were Holocaust survivors or anything like that?
Of course, many of them. Yeah, I've helped write memoirs of Holocaust survivors.
Yeah. Their families are kind of messed up, right? My family is very messed up.
I mean, if you go through a trauma like the Holocaust, I would imagine
they teach that trauma between generations. You know what I mean?
Well, I mean, trauma very often in a lot of circumstances is passed down. I mean, I know some kids of Holocaust survivors who turned out fantastic and some who didn't. I mean,
Yeah. Okay, so you are officially woke. That is what wokeness is about. It's like, people's grandparents or their great-grandparents were slaves.
Well, it's okay. No, it's okay. Guys,
Fuck you, I'm talking.
Guys, I actually want to hear. I want to hear.
No, this
it's
guy,
okay. It's okay. I want to hear. Let's at least hear the argument. Let's hear it. Let's hear it. Go.
What? He wants to hear me.
I do want to hear it. It's fine. Let him go. Let's hear it.
Come on.
So explain how that's woke.
So, I mean, the whole thing is let's see. So during Silent Calvin Coolidge's administration, do you know about the Great Mississippi Flood back in the 1930s?
I understand that American history is filled with racial evil.
Yeah. And that causes some intergenerational trauma, which affects people's ability to be, effective, and things like that.
Fine. So let me ask you a question.
Yeah.
So if the idea is that history has consequences, of course that's true. That's not wokeness.
Yeah.
That is not wokeness. What wokeness suggests is that fundamental institutions in American society
it doesn't.
Yes, it 100% does.
I ran Elizabeth Warren's campaign. I helped organize her volunteers around here. I am a representative of wokeness.
Okay. Well,
and that's this is all it is.
Well, I mean,
when I went to go get my first tattoo, the guy had lightning bolts and 88s tattooed on his neck. And as a Jewish person, that's really messed up. It's basically a threat.
There are racist people who exist. The argument that you're making, and I'm going to close with this because this is going in weird directions, and I don't really want to.
No, it's not
I don't really want to get. Just hold up a second. I let you get out your arguments, and now it's time for me to respond because I let you say the full argument.
Okay, I'll let you respond, but
no, not but. Now's my turn.
You are not characterizing what I'm saying accurately.
Now it's my turn. Your definition is inaccurate. The reason your definition is inaccurate is because any sentient human being would acknowledge that history has consequences.
Right.
But if the idea is, but that's not what wokeism is. Wokeism is a different thing. Wokeism suggests that all inequalities of today are attributable to not only historic injustices, but also continuing injustices in the now. And that all disparity is attributable to discrimination.
Like that, but a conservative. A conservative is the only person. And I want to know why. Why is it that conservatives are the only people who define it like that? Why are conservatives the only people?
Okay, so we're gonna have to stop here because this is going nowhere. But
what's up?
I'm gonna have to stop with you because this is going nowhere. All I'm going to say is this. To sum up,
I just am trying to understand your perspective. Just one more second. On a
fundamental level, you're shifting definitions to avoid the consequences of your own argument. And if the idea is And final point. And final point.
Being censored.
And final point. If you are going to hold on, if you are also, just final point to sum up there. Final point to sum.
I can follow that.
Yeah,
but,
I just want to make, honestly,
go ahead.
I want to make one final point to sum up there. If the idea is that traumas of the past invariably bleed down into the present, that does not explain why certain groups that have been historically not only marginalized but slaughtered in mass genocide are some of the most successful groups in our society. So if the idea is, that past trauma always equals current inequality, or that my actions in, say, robbing a convenience store are attributable to bad actions that happened in Alabama in 1930, the answer to that is no. Don't rob the convenience store. The only way they are going to be able to break the chain of history is to make good decisions. What people on the left don't like to talk about is actual solutions. What they like to do is bitch about problems that existed 60 years ago and blame those for failures to solve them now.
Ben's right, it has nothing to do with race. It does have nothing to do with race and everything to do with culture. If you read stuff by Walter Williams, by Thomas Sowell, you can really see all the statistics on the issues with the black community, and generally stems from fatherless homes. So, Barack Obama said it famously. Tupac Shakur talked about it. The Journal of Research on Adolescence confirms this, that kids that have only one parent at home, that come from a mother-only household, are more likely to have issues, end up in jail, teen pregnancy, higher incarceration rates, school dropouts. 1965% of America's children entered the world without a mother and a father married to each other. And by 1980, that was 18%. By 2000, that was 33%. By 2015, that number was 41%. And now it's even higher. For black people, even during slavery, when marriage for slave was illegal, black children were more likely than today to be raised by both their mother and their father. Explain that one to me. Walter Williams wrote about this, and according to a census data, and I think it was 1890 to 1940, a black child was more likely to grow up with a married parent than out of wedlock when it came to the black community. Out of wedlock birth have gone from 25% in 1965 to 73% in 2015. And for white families, that went from 5% to about 25%. Let's get back to the video.
All right, Ben, again, thanks for coming. So in 2020, me and the boys were deployed, and I want to say thanks because we pretty much survived on your content when we were over there. So
thank you for your service.
So while over there, I was elected as county supervisor, and one of my goals in this elected position is to bridge the gap between the older generation of conservatives that aren't as focused on some of the social issues, you know, like you said, only focused on taxes and things like that. So what advice do you have? How do we bridge the gap between young conservatives like myself and the older conservatives so we can work together and win in 2024, win in 2022?
Yeah.
So what advice do you have?
So, I mean, I think that the sort of establishmentarian conservatives who are very concerned with tax rates, they're going to vote for Republicans anyway, but that's not where the fire is. And that's not where the fire ought to be, because the right, broadly speaking, is always in reaction to the left. The left's central focus right now is on the cultural shift. And if folks who are older don't understand that, then that's probably because they're not operating in the same media that we are. But if you spend all day, you know, not on the internet, not on TikTok, not on Twitter, not on Facebook, not in online spaces where things get very radical very quickly, you might assume that the national discourse is still somewhat reasonable. And then if you spend 5 minutes in the actual national discourse, you realize that things have become completely unreasonable. I mean, we spent an entire year with an entire political party basically arguing that police were bad while murder rates skyrocketed. And that's pretty wild stuff. So I don't think that you have to stretch that far to get older conservatives to come around to this, frankly. I think that they've realized that the fire has shifted, and that the main issue right now is not per se spending. I think that the main issue right now is the pushback against woke culture that has taken over nearly every major American institution. I don't think it's a hard slog, in other words. So,
Thank you.
thank you.
Ben, thanks for coming to Ames. In 1983, Solzhenitsyn stated that the evils of the 20th century happened because men have forgotten God. And I recently read an article that said the 21st century can be summarized as men are at war with God. Where do you think that men specifically have gone wrong, and how did we get to this point? How can fathers, husbands, brothers, boyfriends, sons reclaim their place in society and like reestablish their authentic masculinity?
This is a great question. So I think that the basic problem is the basic problem is actually a really deep problem that I would call the cult of authenticity. I'm not the person who's really focused on this. The author who's focused on this is a guy named Carl Trueman down in Utah. He wrote a fantastic book called The Rise and Triumph of the Modern Self, maybe the most important book of the last 10 years. And what he basically argues is that after the rise of the Enlightenment, there was also a rise in sort of the Romantic era. And the Romantic poets started to argue that true authenticity was to be found interior, right? It was to be, you look in yourself and you look into your feelings, and that's what makes you truly authentic. See, traditional religion teaches that small children are basically tiny barbarians. And if you've ever dealt with small children, they're tiny barbarians, right? They break things and they yell at you and they hit you and they're completely out of control. And it's your job to civilize them as a parent. It's your job to teach them roles and to teach them rules and to punish them when they do bad things and to reward them when they do good things. Small children are innocent, but they're not good. Right? It's your job to teach them the rules for the road so that they become good citizens, right? This is what the process of, this is why civilizing people became a verb, right? You actually had to take people who are not civilized, namely kids, and you had to civilize them to institutions and duties. Then there was the rise of this sort of authentic movement, the authenticity movement. You have to be so authentic. Look to your own feelings. That's the thing that really matters more than anything. Now, for a while, that went nowhere. And the reason that went nowhere is because when most people look to their own feelings, they just want to have sex with everything up to and including trees. And for most of human history, this resulted in some pretty dire consequences, namely things like single motherhood or disease and all the rest of this. And then came the 1960s and the rise of the birth control pill, which has some really salutary effects, right? It allowed people to plan their families in different ways, but also had one effect, which was really core, which was it disconnected for the first time sex and the sort of hedonistic pursuits from consequences. And once that happened, then there was this real push for you can find your happiness in finding your authenticity. And the way we know you're most authentic is if you fight back against all those civilizing influences. You see, if you do what society expects of you, then you're not being yourself. What makes you yourself is denying what society expects of you. So don't be a mother, don't be a father, don't be a husband, don't be a wife, don't be a person, husband and father, beloved mother and sister, right? Beloved mother and wife. Because that, in the end, is what human beings find fulfilling. And if we go back to that, if we go back to the fulfillment of those roles, and that does mean going back to church and finding social institutions to back all of that, then we'll have a healthy society. And if we don't, then we'll completely collapse.
Amen. Thank you.
Black Lives Matter. I'm playing. I'm chill. I'm playing. My question for you, Bennett, is what is like your prayer for like the future of like your family and in the States? And I was wondering if I could drop a prayer as well.
My prayer for the future of my family?
Yeah, like the future and the future of like the nation.
My prayer for the future of the nation is that we live up to our founding ideals and that we preserve the institutions that built the success that this nation has been based upon since the beginning. If we preserve those institutions, then, as I say, with the help of God, we'll succeed. And then my kids have the ability to grow up in a country like that.
Love that. Is it okay if I drop a prayer as well?
Go for it.
Okay. Hey, God, thank you for this day. Thank you for this community. And I pray for truth and safety as everybody gets out this building. And yeah, thank you for Ben and keep him safe on his journeys. In your name I pray. Amen.
Hey, thank you so much. Amen.
Hey, Ben, thanks for coming to Ames tonight. I know we all appreciate it. So for the last 18 months, we've all seen price increases everywhere at the gas pump and at grocery stores, and all of this affects our wallets. So my question to you is, given the current volatility of the US dollar and a possible recession on the horizon, how can we as Americans protect ourselves from the devaluation of our money?
Well, let me refer you to my friends over at Birch Gold. But it's, or alternatively, Alto Crypto IRA. I mean, I can just do ads all day up here. But I mean, the reality is I agree with you. I think that we're about to head into a recession. I'd be very surprised if we don't hit a recession sometime in the next 6 months. That is bad news for everybody. Nobody's rooting for a recession. I think that the only way that I see protecting yourself against recession is to buy assets that are not devaluable by the government, right? So that means hard assets like real estate. That means, yeah, real estate. I do think that diversifying into, listen, I own crypto, right? I have some Bitcoin, I have some Ethereum. I think it's good. I own some precious metals. But, I mean, realistically speaking, you want to be here's my view. Never, okay, if you own stock, don't sell it ever. Just hold on to it forever. Okay, Warren Buffett was once asked about the 2007-2008 crash, and they said, Mr. Buffett, this has been brutal for you. You've lost billions of dollars. He said, what are you talking about? I haven't lost a buck. I said, what do you mean you haven't lost a buck? Because I didn't sell any of my stock. So how do I, if you don't realize a loss, it's not a loss. So in other words, just hold on to your stock and you'll be okay. The temptation is always to sell when the market goes down. This is the opposite of what you should do. Hold on. Also, my investment strategy during recessions is that I double down on buying as much stock as humanly possible. The stock market is artificially depressed. It tends to go back up over time. So when the pandemic hit, I told people on my show, don't sell your stock, start buying stock. This is in March of 2020. I mean, I went to my financial advisor and I said, whatever I'm putting into the stock market every couple of weeks, I want you to double or triple it. So I made out like a bandit for about 1.5 years right there. So the recessions are really when people make their fortunes. It's really not when the market is tremendous that people make their fortunes, because the market always kind of returns back to some level of normalcy. It's when you can buy assets up on the cheap that people tend to do really, really well. So now's a good time to get creative and to think creative. You're going to have to come up with better ideas. I think sometimes, recessions are awful. Again, they're awful. They're not something we should root for. But they do force you to winnow out your bad ideas and pick some good ideas before you actually invest your time and effort into them. So, it can be a growth opportunity for folks. I came out of law school directly during the 2007-2008 recession, and it forced some interesting financial decision-making for me that I think was good for me career-wise in the long run.
Thanks, Ben.
Hey, Ben, thanks for being here. This is super surreal for me. My question is, I was reading about modern monetary theory, which basically says the only reason we should be taxed is, number one, so we use American currency, and number two, to control inflation. That doesn't seem convincing to me. Do you have any thoughts on how people who support this think they should be taxed on like a wealth tax like Elizabeth Warren?
I mean, modern monetary theory is one of the great boondoggles of all time. So earlier we had a reference by a person who seemed like a quite brilliant Elizabeth Warren supporter. Elizabeth Warren is known for a couple of things. One, she is not Native American, and two, she is... And two, she's kind of a quasi-devotee of modern monetary theory. So this is the theory that basically you can spend endlessly via government because the full faith and credit of the United States is so strong that nobody will ever call in debt and inflation will never happen. This was the theory. Modern monetary theory was you can bust out the spending forever without any taxation, without anything else, and the dollar will never devalue. So the last several months have been probably the best rebuttal to modern monetary theory I've ever seen. I mean, we have 8% year-on-year inflation. We have 40-year highs in inflation. This is what happens, predictably enough, when you fire hose $7 trillion at the economy in 2020 and another $7 trillion at the economy in 2021, and when the Fed keeps the rates at zero or negative interest rates. When you do these things, that is modern monetary theory in practice. And what you end up with is massive inflation. And what you're really going to end up with in the end is stagflation, because the economy is going to stagnate. I mean, you're already starting to see it. The economy is overregulated. You're seeing, I mean, now you saw Chuck Schumer came out today, the majority leader, who desperately apparently wants to be a minority leader. He came out yesterday and he said, you know what we really need to solve the inflation? Raise the taxes. It's like, so this is your election plan? Like, going into an election, your plan is, what if we ratchet up inflation to 10% and then tax you more? Sounds great, Chuck. Can't imagine why you guys are getting your asses kicked in November. It's just genius stuff of it. So yeah, modern monetary theory has been a boondoggle. It always was. It assumed that the economy always goes up and never goes down, and that's just not the way it works.
Thank you.
This will be Mr. Shapiro's last question.
I know, it's super sad, guys.
Hi, Ben. I'm Chris. I was wondering your thoughts on Russia versus Ukraine. There's a popular opinion among some people that the United States and NATO is intruding. A comparison I have heard is that if Ukraine were to join the EU or NATO, it would be similar to Russia and Cuba's role in the Cold War.
I mean, the answer to that would be no, because there's been no evidence that NATO has actually attempted to overthrow the Russian regime. Up until Joe Biden sort of blurted out that he kind of wanted to overthrow the Russian regime, which was, and I mean, this is the problem with having a senile person as president of the United States. You just, every so often he just says things, and then the night nurse comes in, Jen Psaki, and has to clean him up, and has to, Joe didn't mean that. He really didn't mean that. It was just, he was expressing his feelings, and Joe was like, and they just kind of, real, and then they, like, the reason I say this is because NATO already bordered Russia in several places. I mean, Poland borders Russia. Latvia, Lithuania, Estonia are part of NATO. They all border Russia. So like they're already. And by the way, if you want to limit your border with Russia, what you don't do is expand your border with Russia by taking over Ukraine, which dramatically widens your border with Russia between NATO and Russia, because Ukraine wasn't actually a NATO admittee. This is not to say that there weren't mistakes made by the West. The big mistake by the West is if you're going to admit Ukraine to NATO, do it. Don't start flirting with them and then don't do it. That puts them in the worst possible position. And it just demonstrates that over the past 20 years, the United States has been a piss-poor ally. It really has. I mean, the United States has stabbed in the back a multiplicity of nations to which it guaranteed security and prosperity. Right? I mean, we did nothing when the Chinese took Hong Kong. We did nothing when, not only nothing, we surrendered the entire country of Afghanistan to the Taliban, leaving Americans behind and millions and millions of dollars worth of military weaponry over there. If you think that didn't play into Putin's calculation, you have another thing coming. You know, there are just too many allies, the Kurds in Iraq. I mean, you can go down the list. And so, you know, what we did with Ukraine in saying to them, it would be great if you joined the EU. It would be great if you joined NATO. Also, you definitely can't join the EU and NATO. Put them in a really awkward position vis-a-vis Russia. Now, with that said, does that mean that Russia then has the right to fully invade Ukraine and take it over? Of course not. Vladimir Putin is operating under 19th century power politics principles. This is what people don't understand. He's not doing anything new. He's not crazy. He's just operating like all the greats in Russian history do. When I say the greats, I mean literally people named the Great. So Catherine the Great, Peter the Great. He's just operating like that. Any Russian leader who expands Russian borders is considered the Great. So if you're Vladimir Putin and you're ending what may be the end of your life, and you are looking to establish your authority, you need to expand the borders of Russia. And that's really what this was about. So was that avoidable by us, you know, sort of being nicer to Vladimir Putin? I mean, we're pretty nice when we let him have Crimea for no reason, and when we let him have the Donbass region for no reason. So yeah, I'm very skeptical of the idea that it was we who provoked him into war by NATO existing. Like, I just don't think that's a correct analysis of the situation.
I have a follow-up question with that too.
Sure.
So Russia, the left is decrying Russia a little bit, and but not China for killing Muslims.
Yes.
Do you have an opinion on that?
I mean, the reason for that is because the media constantly reflect the will of the President of the United States, even if he has no will of his own. So, I mean, I'm just going to keep ripping on Biden if you didn't notice. The simple fact is this: Joe Biden took an aggressive line on Ukraine. If he had taken a not aggressive line on Ukraine, then the media would have said he was doing the right thing not to take an aggressive line on Ukraine. He's taken a not particularly aggressive line on China, and so they say he's right to take a not particularly aggressive line on China. The only shock to me of his entire administration in terms of media coverage is how antipathetic the media were to his moves in Afghanistan. I think that's because a lot of media members had actually been on the ground with American soldiers in Afghanistan, and they knew people in Afghanistan. So I think they were kind of shocked by how quickly things collapsed over there. But, you know, as far as the left's perspective on China and Russia, you have to understand, the Democrats and the media are not two separate wings. They are the same. They are an identity. The Democrats and the media, they eat in the same circles. They talk to the same people. It is an absolute echo chamber. And so whatever Joe Biden wants them to say about Ukraine, they're going to say about Ukraine.
Nobody on the left seems to want to admit that fathers on our president, and that's not just really only in the black community. It's predominantly that they're bigger numbers, but it's affected the white community as well. If you watch your channel, like, this all happened because of the Welfare Act, the Lyndon Baines Johnson Welfare Act. Like in 1949, the nation's poverty was 34%. By 1965, that was cut in half to 17%. And this was all before Lyndon Johnson's so-called war on poverty. From 1965 to now, the government spent about $28 to $25 trillion to fight poverty. And guess what? The poverty rate has remained the same. This thing has flatlined, but the relationship between poor men and women has changed dramatically. That's because the welfare system, this generous welfare system that was implemented by Lyndon Baines Johnson, allowed women to marry the government. They allowed women to have subsidies and money from the government, assuming the man wasn't in the household. That incentivizes the women to leave, but it also makes it very easy for men to abandon their traditional morals and financial responsibilities. And most of the heart crime is created by young boys. And your mother cannot calm you down the way a man can. This is something Tupac Shakur mentioned a few times. So you can tell I'm a big hip-hop fan. He mentioned many times if he had a father, he would have had more discipline and he would have been more confident. This is often why kids join gangs, because they get structure and they get protection, something that women cannot provide for young boys in most cases. Fathers matter. So we got to get rid of no-fault divorce. You got to get rid of these incentives that give women more money just to break up the nuclear family. Fathers matter. And until the government policies that make that a first priority to change, it's just going to get worse. Hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please smash that thumbs up button, consider subscribing to the channel, help it grow. Catch you all in the next video. Peace out, everybody.